Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar book video. This one is going to be a review, kind of mostly just me talking, giving an overview on the newly released Avatar The Last Airbender official baking book. So this is kind of like the second recipe book basically that Inside Editions have released for Avatar. Back in 2021 they also released the official cookbook, and now as of just 2 weeks ago we have the official baking book. So there is a little bit of interesting stuff to talk about here. It's not just like, oh, it's another cookbook and it's done in the exact same way as the previous one is, just with more recipes, maybe just with more recipes focused on baking. It's not quite as simple as that. There's a little bit more to it, so I want to get into that. I will say straight away up front, this was sent to me for free by Insight Editions. They got in touch with me, asked if I wanted to do a video on it. I said yes. They didn't even say what type of video they wanted to do. I said I'd do a kind of review, overview type thing that involved a bit of a comparison with the first book. And that's how this came about. So get that notification out of the way. Let's get into talking about it. So I think the big thing is just to kind of really highlight, how different in approach this book is compared to the original one. I would describe this as a little bit more of an accessible cookbook. It feels a little bit more beginner focused, a bit more like, hey, let's not assume all Avatar fans really know how to do all these kind of crazy recipes and stuff like that. Let's do a baking book that kind of takes a lot of classic recipes and gives them a bit of an Avatar twist in terms of presentation, and in some cases maybe using the kind of authentic ingredients that reference the different nations. But fundamentally it's stuff that you would usually make and you would usually see in a cookbook, but an Avatar style. That is, I think, quite different than the original cookbook, which to me was much more of a, we are trying to authentically replicate the food from the show. Both the food that was directly shown in episodes, but then also kind of using the kind of cultures that each of the nations are kind of based off from real life. Really leaning into kind of the cuisine on that side of things. So it kind of made it kind of like an Asian kind of cookbook to a certain degree. But that also meant that, like, is it the most accessible, maybe beginner-friendly cookbook in the world? Perhaps not. Again, a lot is always going to depend on how you are with regards to like what food do you actually like to eat and stuff like that. When it comes to like preparing food, like, do you regularly do recipes that require like a large instruction list, maybe having to use lots of ingredients and stuff like that? That's not quite me. And so the original cookbook kind of felt like, scrolling through it, like really cool to see the dishes replicated like they were, but it's like, ooh, don't think I'm ever really going to make that because I don't really eat that or that, and that seems kind of quite complicated to do. And for someone who like doesn't do tons of cooking kind of from scratch to a certain degree like this, this is a little bit almost daunting of a prospect to tackle quite a few of the recipes here. As cool as it was to see them do it in that style, I do think this is kind of, this one maybe fits a little bit better for the kind of, in a way, the audience that they were kind of releasing it kind of like into overall. It's just like, yeah, going for the beginner approach and going for like, let's show off the first recipe in the book because I think that makes it quite clear. The Aang cupcakes. It's just a kind of classic cupcake recipe that like, it's a cupcake with frosting, some fondant decoration, and then it is like a filled cupcake as well. So like you obviously adjust this as you need to, because fundamentally the Avatar aspect of it is just the Aang presentation on the top. And then the idea is that like, oh, you could become maybe inspired by this and try to maybe do other characters in different colors and stuff like that. It's kind of cool because it's like, hey, cupcake recipe, that's always kind of like an easy thing to do. And it's just like, hey, spend some time on the presentation to make it Avatar like. The second one I think is also a good example, the Appa footprint buns, and it's like this kind of like buns, kind of filled bun recipe, but like combine it in this unique way with the kind of center of the paw and the toes to make it look like sky bison footprints is a cool thing. Momo meringues kind of gets the same idea across of just they're mostly like presentation style dishes. Then you have one where it's like, oh, more of a direct replication from the show, the Air Nomad fruit pies, which was also a recipe in this book, but obviously it leaned a little bit more, let's do it as authentic as possible, whereas this one is more like, hey, let's make a pie, let's make it look like the show as much as possible without kind of going crazy with it. Just kind of, I think, some pretty cool stuff kind of overall in terms of the approach that they did there. There is stuff like, say, like the elephant koi cookies, where they give you the kind of outline to get the koi fish shape, which I thought was kind of cool. Genomite cookies, I think, is actually one of the more notable ones, because there's also an attempt at Genomite in the original cookbook, and I think this is where there's actually a pretty noticeable kind of comparison, whereas what they go for here is kind of cookies that have a unique icing to get across the kind of crystal aspect of rock candy that Genomite is, whereas I think they went more for like some like sugar, like melted sugar kind of thing, and some of the preparation seemed a little bit like, ooh, that sounds a bit like daunting again, whereas this one was more like, oh, I think I can do that, and it actually looks kind of cool and unique. So, you know, that sort of a, you know, fun idea there. And as you go through, it just feels like, oh yeah, that's what they're doing here. Like, it's something like this is quite cool, like sungi horns as just kind of like a cream filled kind of pastry type thing that's just roughly shaped like a sungi horn. It's kind of like, you know, cool without kind of going overboard. Blasting jelly cakes. It's just like, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing here. So I think that going through this one here, there's a lot more things in this cookbook that I'm like, actually, I might make that someday. Compared to this one where it just feels like intimidating almost, about like, oh, do I want to make that? Can I? That sort of idea. The only maybe criticisms of the book from a cookbook kind of perspective I'd have is just that I felt that maybe there were a few too many recipes that didn't have an actual picture of them. You know, like, you know, you go to this one, black snow cake, and there's no picture. And there's more than just one, of course. There's quite a few of them, and there are sometimes pages where there's like 2 recipes in a row that don't have a picture. And I understand it for some of them, where like it makes sense, where fundamentally what you are making here is like a cookie with some Avatar kind of inspired ingredients. So it's just a cookie. So like, do you need the picture of the cookie? You know what a cookie looks like? That's fine. But then there's other ones where it is like, this is like Azula lightning bolt shaped things. And it's kind of like, I kind of would like a little bit of guidance with the picture on like what exact way like you did it, you know, writing the book. I get roughly what they mean by lightning bolt shape, but like, you know, it would have been nice to just see some of that stuff kind of improve, especially when like it feels like maybe some of the recipes kind of feel like I don't think you needed a picture of that one because the Avatar presentation is not so extreme that like it needs a picture. Like toff brownies, it's just a brownie. The picture is literally just brownies, and it's like, okay, cool, there's a brownie recipe in here, but I don't need to see it when there's no real Avatar presentation to it. Whereas like, yeah, 1 or 2 of the other ones, it's like, actually there's some presentation stuff here that I'd maybe like some guidance on. That would be kind of cool. The final thing maybe I want to say about this one is just like, okay, let's actually get into the whole flavor text thing here. Because of course, one of the things that I think Avatar fans remember the original cookbook for was that it did have the, you know, written in character post-show flavor text written by the characters about like the different recipes and stuff like that, and it included a few kind of tidbits of information that were kind of surprising. Some of them were just small little things that were kind of nice to know, but then there was a few things that were on the kind of like bigger end of things, to the point where like in the hardcore fan base, the cookbook does on occasion get brought up by people not for cookbook reasons but because of the flavor text reasons. And it is interesting that that is perhaps one of the legacies of this original book is just like, hey, there's a couple of canon material kind of things going on in that. Unfortunately, not really the case with the new book. They've clearly made the approach here to like, okay, let's not write completely new original entries for each of these recipes as if they are the characters. Let's instead just use the flavor text kind of as actual flavor text, as a way to explain sort of like what part of the show is this recipe referencing, which episode and stuff like that, which character is it referencing. And then in some cases it also kind of helps you to helps to give more feedback on terms of like, wait, what are we making here? Because some of the names are maybe not the most kind of like obvious, and the end of the flavor text does explain to you that like, oh, and it's actually like a cupcake underneath and stuff like that. Let's for instance read this one out. Unfried dough pie. Again, in the previous book, they would talk more about like what's actually happening in the nations, which character is the one actually making it, and they make references to stuff going on in their lives. In this case, you can see the way it's written here. What a great way to celebrate the day that the Avatar was not boiled in oil by the people of Chin Village. No need to throw a huge festival in his honor. Instead, show your appreciation by baking this special new Avatar Day pie, with a crust made from a lattice work of tiny dough angs, meant to look like a certain bowl of avatars presented to our heroes after their victory. Its unfried goodness offers a nice break from Sokka's favorite deep-fried festival foods. So you can see the approach here is just, let's make a bunch of references to the characters and the episodes that we all know, just to get everyone up to speed in terms of like what we're actually doing here. There's nothing I think particularly interesting overall going on here. I think it's mostly, selected relatively well. The right references are made for the right things. Of course, there's always a few things where it kind of feels like, there's not much to say about this one in terms of like, why it was chosen necessarily. Let me find one of the ones that's a little bit more like representative of like at sometimes like the cookbook is sort of just like, okay, we have to make a reference here when it's not the most Avatar-y thing that's actually being made here. Like this page, possum chicken pies. It's chicken pies. That's all that it is. There's nothing I think in particularly complicated about this in terms of what's actually being kind of made here. It's like filled chicken pies with like, I think it's curry on the inside. And the reference here is obviously because possum chickens were referenced in the Foggy Swamp tribe episode, The Swamp, and that's kind of what they go through here, is just referencing possum chicken and so on. That's the main diet of the Foggy Swamp tribe, and that's all it's really referencing here. And you can see like the presentation of this, there's nothing particularly Avatar about it, but that's fine. It's a cookbook. It has to have kind of some things like that. You can't go crazy on the presentation for everything. There's the Azula lightning bolt bites that, like I said, don't have the picture. So that's I think pretty much everything I want to talk about in the video. I think there are kind of pros and cons to each book. I think they're both like decent cookbooks for what they are. I think it's hard to kind of rave about the book just like from an Avatar fan perspective, just because like, hey, is this one of the most notable Avatar book releases of the year? Not really, but it is nice to kind of always get I think a look inside these kind of new extra books that release during the year and kind of see like, hey, what's actually going on with them, and that actually, hey, this is actually quite good as more of a basic beginner accessible cookbook for Avatar. And I think that's actually cool that they made something quite different than the first one overall. Even if, like, yes, it's not maybe the most interesting Avatar book. Like, if you're here for the Avatar content in a way of this book, there's not much here because the flavor text is rather plain and just the obvious references you'd expect. And then a few, like, a few images of the characters, like, Momo down here, they throw them in every so often. But, the pictures of the actual recipes, when they include them, are nice. There's like 70, I think, ish recipes in this book. It might be just slightly under that. There's like, I think 23 or 24 per book, and it's basically done in order. And so yeah, for what it is, I think it's pretty decent, especially with, I think, Christmas coming up, the holiday season coming up. This seems like an ideal sort of like gift this book to an Avatar fan, because, you know, this might not be one of the Avatar pieces of merchandise that people are kind of rushing out to kind of grab, but like, hey, coming at the Christmas, it's a nice thing, I think, to have out there. But I also would say it's don't forget about the original cookbook, because again, it has that fun flavor text stuff going on with it. And if you are kind of more of a cook, like you actually like making stuff and you're quite confident with it, hey, there's kind of more advanced recipes that really lean into truly making the food of the Avatar world in the original one. This one might be for you. So I think there's some fun things to be had with both cookbooks. But gonna wrap up the video there. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.